The morning began without incident. I remember the scent of Colombian roast filling the kitchen, the low hum of the dishwasher, and the slant of sunlight warming the tiles near the window. Mariel sat at the counter, flipping through emails on her tablet, still in the silk robe I bought her for our 5th anniversary. I was humming something soft, something meaningless, when the front door slammed open with all the grace of a thunderclap. I didn't even have time to turn my head fully before Selena marched in, eyes wild, hair in disarray, fury wrapped around her like a cloak. Adrian got me pregnant. Just like that. No warning, no build-up, no tact. She tossed the words like a grenade and stood there, daring the silence to catch fire. I blinked. Once. Twice. A million questions surged up, tangled and incoherent. What was all I could manage? Mariel didn't turn to me. She didn't ask. She didn't scream. She just stood. Slowly, with the eerie calm of someone who has already made a decision, and walked toward me. And then she slapped me. I didn't see it coming. One moment, the ceramic mug was warm in my hand. The next, it shattered against the tile, hot coffee spraying across my forearm as the sting bloomed across my cheek. I didn't move. My breath caught, my balance shifted, and I stared at the woman I loved, the woman I thought knew me better than anyone else in the world, as her face morphed into something cold and foreign. Mariel, I didn't. Save it, she spat, voice shaking not with sadness, but with rage. Don't speak. Just don't. Selena stood behind her, arms crossed, triumphant. There was no fear in her eyes, no uncertainty. Just vindication. I took a step back, confusion and pain battling for dominance. This isn't true. You have to know that. That was when the front door opened again. Ramon and Declan. Her brothers. Both built like linebackers, both already red-faced and breathing hard like they had sprinted from hell just for the chance to deliver judgment. Ramon didn't say anything. He grabbed my shoulder with one hand and my collar with the other. I resisted, at first, reflexively. But I could see it. There was no listening here. No space for questions or facts. Declan yanked the front door wider, and the sunlight spilled in like a spotlight. They dragged me outside, their grip unforgiving. I stumbled once, my knee scraping the steps. Don't fight it, Ramon growled, almost too low for anyone else to hear. You earned this. And then it started. The first punch came from Declan, square to the stomach, knocking the wind out of me. The second from Ramon, a hook to the jaw that sent me sprawling onto the front lawn. I heard the gasps. Neighbors. People I knew. People I waved to. People whose kids I once helped with math homework. They stood frozen on porches, behind hedges, pretending they weren't watching, but they were. I tried to get up, but Declan kicked me in the ribs. I curled in on myself, the world narrowing to pain and breath and the surreal understanding that this was real. This was happening. This is what you do to family? Ramon shouted at me, though it wasn't a question. You disgust me. I spat blood onto the grass and finally looked up. Mariel stood on the porch, unmoved. Selena beside her, smug and untouched. I didn't touch her, I croaked. She's lying. No one cares, Declan muttered, lifting me by my collar one more time before shoving me down again. A woman nearby whimpered. Mrs. Doyle. I used to fix her porch lights every summer. She turned away. Everything I'd built, every sacrifice, every holiday spent with Mariel's family instead of my own, every late night at the office to afford our mortgage, every quiet gesture of loyalty, it all meant nothing now. I wasn't a man in their eyes. I was a headline, a scandal. Finally, the brothers stepped back, satisfied. I lay in the dirt, groaning, not from the pain but from the hollow way everything had just unraveled. Ramon wiped his hands like he'd just done a chore. Stay away from all of us, he barked. You're not welcome anywhere near this family again. Mariel didn't say a word. She turned and walked back inside. The door closed with a click. And just like that, I was no longer Adrian, the husband, the brother-in-law, the dependable one. I was the monster. I pulled myself up slowly, one knee at a time, body screaming in protest. I looked down at my bloodied shirt, the shattered remnants of my life reflected in the dark red. I wanted to scream, to run back inside and force them to listen, to demand a shred of decency. But something told me the words would bounce off walls too hardened by betrayal or the illusion of it. Instead, I limped down the street, past the neighbors who wouldn't meet my eye, past the mailbox I once painted blue to surprise Mariel, past the house we called home. There would be no explanation, no trial, just sentence and execution. And I, fool that I was, never even got to plead my case. I didn't pack much. a duffel bag with a few shirts, my passport, an old laptop, and the last bit of cash I had hidden in the back of the closet, money meant for a weekend getaway that would never happen now. I left my wedding ring on the bathroom counter, next to Mariel's lavender-scented lotion, and walked out the back door. I didn't want to see the front lawn again. The blood had already dried in the grass. For the first few days, I wandered. No destination, just motion. I kept my hood up, stayed in cheap motels where no one asked questions, ate from vending machines and gas station counters. My phone buzzed endlessly that first night. Messages from mutual friends, colleagues, even my cousin Julian. What the hell, man? Tell me it's not true. You've got to be kidding me, Selena. I didn't respond. What was the point? I could hear it in their tone, accusation painted over with a thin layer of concern. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a spectacle, a clean narrative, someone to condemn. I was already cast in the role. By the fifth day, I disabled my social accounts. One by one. Facebook, LinkedIn, even my freelance business page. Each deletion felt like another piece of me being swallowed by silence. But it was better than watching my name rot in real time. A week later, I got a call from HR. Not Marcia from the front desk, the actual director of human resources, a man I'd only spoken to twice in my entire career. His voice was neutral, too neutral. Like he was reading from a pre-approved script. We're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct an internal review. It's best for all parties involved. Best for who? Not me. I didn't argue. I simply hung up and sat there in the parking lot of a fast food joint off the interstate, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. That was the first time I felt it. Not anger, not sadness, but erasure. Like I was being peeled off the surface of the world, one memory at a time. I called my sister. She didn't answer. I texted my old friend Marcus, the one who once swore we were brothers for life. Nothing. I sent a voice note to my goddaughter on her birthday, just a simple happy birthday, kiddo. Uncle Adrian loves you. It stayed marked as delivered. Never played. Then came the moment that made it real. I walked into Hanley's Bakery a few towns over, thinking maybe I could hide in routine. I used to stop there every Friday. Mrs. Hanley always saved me a cinnamon roll. The soft ones, she'd say with a wink. I know how you like them. The bell chimed as I pushed open the door. The smell was the same, yeasty, warm, inviting. For a second, I forgot. For a second, I thought maybe the world had just paused and was waiting for me to hit resume. She looked up from the register. Her smile died the moment she saw me. We're closed, she said. I blinked. There were 3 customers behind me in line. The shelves were still stocked. Really? I said. You're closed. She didn't respond. She just turned her back. That was it. Not a man. Not even a customer. Just a shadow. I walked out and didn't look back. I tried to stay near familiar places, but everything turned cold. The barber I'd known since college said he was booked indefinitely. The bartender at the pub where I celebrated my last birthday poured my drink with a frown, then disappeared to the back. My former neighbors avoided eye contact like looking at me might ruin their evening. And the whispers, God, the whispers. I'd catch fragments in grocery store aisles. That's him, I think. Selena's baby. Remember? Didn't Mariel's family, No one knew the truth, but the lie had legs. It sprinted, and I couldn't chase it. After a month, my bank account was almost dry. My landlord had already replaced the locks. Even my favorite bookstore clerk, the one I used to recommend novels to, slipped me a pitying glance and offered me store credit for the books I returned. I slept in my car for a while. Showers at the gym. Meals from charity bins. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I didn't recognize, a gaunt, hollow-eyed man with a bruised ego and a name that no longer belonged to him. Adrian was dead, not by his own hand, but by the world's silent consensus. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the beating. It was how easily people let me vanish. How quickly they rewrote the story without asking me for a single line. It turns out, erasure isn't loud. It's quiet. It's 1,000 small refusals, spoken in the language of indifference. No one screamed at me in the streets. They just looked through me like I wasn't there. And after a while, I wasn't. I had no job, no friends, no family, just silence. One morning, I stared at my reflection in a cracked gas station mirror and whispered the truth to myself. I didn't do it. The man in the mirror didn't believe me. That's when I knew I had to leave not just the town, not just the people. I had to leave the name. I had to vanish completely. Not out of shame. but for survival. Because Adrian was a man no one wanted. And the only way to live again was to become someone else. Someone untouched. Someone unseen. Someone like Miles. The bus ticket didn't have a destination that mattered. Just Wyndham Bay, Route 6. It sounded far enough. Unremarkable enough. A place where no one would look for Adrian. I paid in cash, kept my eyes low, and sank into the scratchy fabric of the back row. The bus rumbled out of the city like it couldn't wait to spit me out somewhere forgettable. That suited me fine. I didn't want a grand arrival. I wanted to disappear so quietly the world would forget I ever existed. The trip took most of the day. I watched the landscape shift from gray high-rises to tired suburbs, then to rolling fields and crumbling barns that looked like they'd given up long before I had. By the time the coastline appeared, the sun had given up too. I stepped off the bus just after sunset into air that smelled like brine and old rope. Wyndham Bay wasn't picturesque. It was worn at the edges. Boats bobbed lazily at the dock, and the shops along the strip were mostly closed, their windows taped with faded flyers. Perfect. I found a room above a bait shop, the kind of place with stained carpets, a humming mini-fridge, and a lumpy bed that hadn't seen fresh linen in weeks. The innkeeper, Greta, handed me the key without asking for ID. She was short, maybe in her 60s, with storm gray hair and eyes that didn't blink often. Rinse due every Friday. Don't be late. That was it. No judgment. No curiosity. Just rules. I liked her immediately. The next morning, I walked the docks and asked around for work. Most folks barely looked at me. They were used to strangers coming and going. But one man, a gruff, barrel-chested guy with sun-damaged skin and a permanent scowl, paused long enough to size me up. "You breathe?" he asked. I nodded. "Got hands?" I held them up. "Good. Start now. Nets need untangling." His name was Ben, and he didn't care what I used to do or who I used to be. He cared that I showed up on time, didn't talk too much, and didn't complain about the stink of fish. I didn't. Not once. I scrubbed, mended, hauled, and tied knots until my knuckles blistered. It was honest work. No screens. No meetings. Just the creak of wood, the slap of water, and the ache of muscles that finally had something to do. I told Ben my name was Miles. Short for nothing. Just Miles. It stuck. At night, I sat at the small table in my room and opened the old laptop. I couldn't help it. Code was the one thing that made me feel like myself again. I didn't have much, just a few saved scripts and templates, but it was enough to start rebuilding. I created a throwaway email, then a new alias. I started bidding on freelance tech jobs, bug fixes, database cleanups, security patches. Small stuff. Quiet stuff. I didn't talk to clients on the phone. I used text or email, kept my answers short, and signed everything A.M. Reeves. Adrian Miles Reeves. A name stitched together from scraps of my past. I kept the initials to remind myself that I wasn't erasing everything, just the part they tried to burn. One night, Greta knocked on my door with a paper bag of leftovers. "Fish chowder," she said gruffly. "Eat." She didn't wait for thanks. Just turned and left. The next morning, there was coffee waiting in a chipped mug by the door. I'd never told her I drank it black. Wyndham Bay didn't ask questions. It didn't care who you used to be. As long as you paid your dues and kept your head down, it left you alone. That kind of anonymity was its own kind of mercy. The world had painted me a villain, but here, I was just Miles who worked the nets and fixed things on computers. After a few weeks, Ben started sending people my way. "He's got a brain," he'd grunt, jerking a thumb toward me. "Knows computers." That's how I met Harper, a soft-spoken woman who ran a failing artisan shop and needed a website. I built it for $50 and a bag of homemade muffins. Then came Noel, a young guy with a limp who had a talent for code but no direction. I offered to train him. Just 2 nights a week. He picked things up fast. Smarter than I ever was at his age. A.M. Reeves Tech wasn't born with a plan. It started as survival. But slowly, it became something more. A quiet corner of the digital world that was mine. No investors. No logos. Just clean code and honest work. I worked during the day, coded at night. Sometimes I didn't sleep. That was fine. Sleep felt indulgent in a life borrowed. Greta never asked what I was building. Ben didn't care as long as I didn't miss my shifts. The sea smelled the same every morning. Fish, salt, and diesel. And my hands, once soft from keyboard life, were now calloused and rough. I liked that. It made me feel real again. There were moments, late at night, when I'd think about Mariel, about how she didn't blink. about the sound of my mug shattering against the tile. I'd let the memory sit with me like an unwelcome guest, but then I'd push it out. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I had to keep moving forward. In Wyndham Bay, no one called me a liar. No one looked at me like I was filth. They looked at me like I was Miles. One night, Noel asked if Miles was my real name. I paused, then shrugged. It's real enough. He didn't press, just nodded, like he understood. Maybe he did. Months passed, then a year. The work grew. The town barely changed, but I did. I stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for someone to recognize me, even started laughing again, quiet, rare, but real. I hadn't forgiven the world. Not yet, but I had found a sliver of peace. In scrubbing nets, in late-night debugging, in the stillness of a life no one envied. Adrian may have been erased, but Miles was just beginning. I never meant for it to become a company. It started with a broken boat engine and a few lines of Python code. That was it. Ben had been cursing the damn thing for a week straight, grumbling about mechanics and saltwater sabotage. One morning after our shift, I asked if I could take a look. He waved me off like I was just bored, but he didn't say no. 3 hours later, covered in oil and sweat, I handed him a fixed control panel that hummed back to life like it had never been touched by corrosion. He didn't say thank you. He just grunted, nodded once, and handed me a six-pack of beer. That's how it began. Not with applause, but with acknowledgement. The next day, Harper came by the docks with a tablet in her hands and a desperate look in her eyes. Her online shop had gone down during a flash sale and customers were already tagging her on social media, calling it a scam. I told her I'd take a look, mostly because I'd seen that kind of fear before, the kind that wraps around your ribs and tightens every hour your work is offline. I didn't want anything in return, not even muffins this time. I just fixed it. By that evening, she told 3 others. I had 5 messages by the time I checked my inbox the next morning. One needed help with invoices, another with domain hosting. Someone else had accidentally deleted half their product catalog. I worked out of my room at first, hunched over the chip desk with its wobbly leg, fingers flying across the keys while the fan buzzed in protest. Then Noel knocked on my door. He shuffled in like he wasn't sure he belonged, one hand in his hoodie pocket, the other gripping a beat-up laptop like it was made of glass. Greta said you might, teach? I didn't ask what he meant. I knew. He wanted more than help. He wanted to learn. He wanted to be useful. So I pulled up a second chair and said, show me what you've got. Turned out, Noel wasn't just eager, he was good. Raw, but good. The kind of brain that sees code like a puzzle instead of a problem. I let him take on the small bugs at first, then database entries, then entire backends, until we were working side by side every night, laughing about badly commented code and the disasters that came from WordPress plugins no one ever updated. We called ourselves AM Reeves Tech because we needed something to invoice under, and the initials kept the ghost quiet. No flashy website, no bio, just clean design and quiet execution. I let Harper design the logo, a wave curling into a circuit line. And even that felt too loud, too polished for what we were. But it worked. People didn't care who we were. They cared that we delivered. We were the ghost coders behind storefronts that looked like big brands and backends that didn't crash under traffic. We answered emails at midnight. We never missed a deadline. We didn't post testimonials. We didn't ask for praise. We just built. Some nights I'd walk down to the beach, feel the salt spray on my face, and wonder if Adrian would recognize this version of me. Would he be proud? Confused? Would he see a survivor or a coward? I never answered the question. I didn't need to. Miles was never meant to replace Adrian. He was just meant to breathe. Our workshop eventually moved out of my room and into the back half of a boarded-up surf shop Greta used to own. You'll pay me in repairs and groceries, she said, tossing me the keys. Don't bring idiots in here. We didn't. We brought in purpose. Every wire we laid, every coffee ring left on the desk, it all built something sacred. A second chance. There were no office chairs. Just crates and a sagging couch Noel found on the side of the road. But it was ours. We operated in silence. Not the kind that's lonely, but the kind that clients started referring us. Small business owners, nonprofits, a couple of independent authors. One woman paid us in gift cards to a diner 3 towns over. I took Noel there one Saturday as a bonus. We split a massive stack of pancakes and didn't talk about work at all. For once, we weren't hiding. We were just existing. The best part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the success. It was the rhythm. Wake up before the sun. Tie nets. Breathe salt. Work. Eat. Code. Rest. That rhythm healed parts of me therapy never touched. It told me I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to build something no lie could destroy. Some nights, I'd scroll through old photos, ones I hadn't deleted. Mariel's smile. The way her hair always curled at the end of the day. I'd look at her and wonder what version of me she remembered. The monster Selena painted? The ghost that left? Or something more complicated? I never lingered long. There were lines of code waiting. Orders to fulfill. A business growing from the ashes of my silence. One night, Noelle asked me why I did it. Why I worked so hard when I could just coast off the jobs we already had. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Because the truth doesn't need applause, I said. It just needs a place to breathe. He didn't say anything. Just nodded, like he understood again. And maybe he did. Maybe we all did. Everyone in that small room had a reason to be quiet. A past too heavy to explain. But in that silence, we weren't victims. We were builders. And every website, every fix, every pixel we laid down, it wasn't just business. It was survival. The rain had been coming down in sheets all afternoon, thick and cold, the kind that made the ocean look like wrinkled steel. I just finished fixing a faulty payment gateway for a bakery client 2 towns over and was halfway through reviewing a CSS mess Noelle had handed me when the knock came. It was soft at first, a single tap, then another, then a pause. I looked up from the screen, the hum of the generator and the rustle of the rain blending into the kind of quiet you don't disturb unless you absolutely have to. Greta never knocked. Noelle always burst in without warning. Harper only ever texted. I stood slowly, more curious than cautious, and walked to the front of the shop. The windows were fogged. I wiped a small circle clear with the heel of my palm and saw her. Soaked to the bone, hair plastered to her face. A coat that had seen better days clinging to her like a wet tarp. She looked smaller. Not physically, Mariel had always been petite, but diminished, hollowed out. Like life had wrung her dry and didn't bother handing her back the pieces. I didn't open the door right away. Part of me thought I was imagining it. Another part, stronger, stood completely still, letting every memory from 3 years ago wash over me like a second storm. The slap, the look in her eyes, the blood on the grass. The silence that came after. Another knock. Louder this time. Desperate. I opened the door. For a moment, she just stood there, blinking up at me. I waited for the speech, the apology, the demand. But what came out instead was quiet. Shaky. I know now, she whispered. No hello. No excuse. Just that. I know now. I stepped aside. Not because I'd made a decision, but because the rain had started to curl under the roof and I wasn't heartless. She stepped in cautiously, like the floor might bite. We stood there, 2 ghosts with the same unfinished chapter between us. She looked around the shop, at the crates, the tangled cords, the workbench covered in code sketches and wrappers from late-night snacks. Her eyes landed on a photo taped to the wall, one of Noelle and Harper holding up a client award they'd won last month. You built this? She asked softly. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and retrieved the USB drive. A small, matte silver stick I'd guarded like a relic. I had made 3 copies, one encrypted, one offsite, one personal. But this was the one I always kept close. I held it out to her. She didn't move to take it. What is it? She asked. Proof, I said. Play it when you're alone. And really listen. She took it with trembling fingers, held it like it might catch fire. Her lips parted, but no words came. I didn't offer her coffee. I didn't ask how she'd found me. I didn't give her a seat. I was done performing comfort for people who had once watched me burn. Her eyes scanned the room again, as if trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the villain she condemned. I didn't know, she said finally. Not then. I gave her a single nod. Not acceptance. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Then I opened the door. She hesitated in the doorway, looking back once. The streetlight caught her face just enough for me to see the sheen in her eyes. She stepped out into the rain without another word. I locked the door behind her. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anger. Not from sorrow. But from the stillness that settled over me like an exhale I'd been holding for years. Because I knew, whatever happened next, that the truth had finally taken its first breath. I sat at my workbench long after the lights went out, hands resting on the keyboard but unmoving. I imagined her back in whatever motel she'd found, plugging the USB into her laptop, pressing play. I knew exactly what she'd hear. Selena's voice. Giddy. Too loud. Like someone who thought no one was listening. She looked at me like I was crazy, but I knew I had to do it. I mean, he never even saw me. Not once. Always so damn polite, so distant. I wanted him to feel it, you know? To pay attention. And now, he's the villain. The family hates him. You should have seen their faces. It was perfect. No one even questioned it. Laughter. Then silence. Then her voice again, lower this time. I mean, I didn't think it would go that far. The brothers beating him? That part was wild. But honestly, he deserved it. For making me feel invisible. That was the part that always made my jaw tighten. Not the lie. Not even the violence. But the entitlement. The way she spoke like I was a punishment she'd been forced to design. The audio cut off after 8 minutes. 8 minutes that had cost me 3 years of my life. I hadn't leaked it yet. I'd sat on it for months, even when I wanted to scream. I told myself it wasn't time. That I needed the world to forget me before I reminded them. But now, as the sky began to pale and the rain softened to a whisper, I felt it. The final thread pulling tight. She knew. And that meant everything else would start unraveling soon. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want her to fall to her knees and beg. I just wanted her to see. To understand the cost of her silence, her judgment, her failure to look me in the eyes and ask, "Did you?" That USB wasn't just proof. It was a mirror. And now it was hers to carry. I shut down my laptop just as the sun cracked over the horizon, casting soft light through the salt-fogged window. It touched every corner of the workshop, warming even the darkest corners. Truth doesn't scream. It whispers. And that morning, it whispered loud enough to shake the past awake. She came back the next morning. No knock this time. Just the slow creak of the shop door swinging open at dawn while I was sorting wires and double-checking code for a new shipping client. The sun was barely above the ocean line, spilling amber across the floor, lighting up dust particles like confessions in the air. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, not puffy but raw. She wore the same coat, now dry and stiff, and her hair was pulled into a haphazard bun that made her look years younger and heavier with regret. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The silence had weight between us now, like a third person in the room. She stepped forward slowly, like every inch between us might cut her. She held the USB drive in her hand like it weighed as much as a brick. I listened to it, she said. I nodded, still untangling a cable, still focused on something that wasn't her face. All of it, she said. I listened to it 3 times. This time, I met her eyes. And her voice cracked. I ruined you. That wasn't a confession. It was a sentence. Like she'd been trying the words out all night in the mirror, testing how they felt in her mouth. And now they sat there between us, damp and brittle and too late. I didn't argue. I didn't offer her the comfort of contradiction. She wasn't wrong. But you didn't deserve it, she whispered. Not the slap. Not any of it. My jaw clenched. That old instinct to explain, to plead, flickered in my throat. But I swallowed it back. I had done all the explaining I ever would. Now it was her turn to sit with it. She looked around the workshop like she needed something to anchor her, something physical to remind her I had survived. You built something beautiful, Miles. She used the name like it belonged to me, like it didn't hurt. But it did. Not because it wasn't true, but because it had to become true. Because Adrian had been thrown out like trash and Miles had to rise from the pieces. I didn't come to ask for anything, she said quickly. Not forgiveness. Not to be taken back. I know better. I tilted my head, watching her. Then why are you here? She hesitated, swallowing hard. Because I needed you to know I'm not who I was. That I've been carrying it. Every day. That I finally understand what I did when I didn't ask you a single question. When I let them drag you into the street and didn't speak. I should have known better. The old part of me, the one still bleeding in the front yard, the one that wanted someone to scream the truth into a courtroom of her family's faces, wanted to shout. But the man I was now, the man with calloused fingers and a growing tech business and a quiet life he earned, just exhaled. I forgave you already, I said. She blinked like she hadn't heard me right. What? I forgave you, Mariel, I repeated, standing upright, wiping my hands on a rag. Months ago. Her lip trembled. Why? Because I needed to, I said plainly. Not for you. For me. Forgiveness wasn't a door opening. It was a window closing. A way to seal off the draft, To stop letting the cold memory of betrayal blow through everything I did. I didn't forgive her because she earned it. I forgave her because I refused to let her hold my peace hostage any longer. She sank into the edge of the couch Noelle sometimes napped on, hands cradling her face like they were the only things keeping her together. I don't deserve that. Probably not, I said, and it wasn't cruel. It was true. She nodded slowly, like each breath cost her more than the last. I tried to tell them. My family. About the recording. About what Selena said. And Ramon won't return my calls. Declan sent me a single text, too late. Selena said it was edited. Said I manipulated it. She looked up, eyes wet but steady. It's all unraveling, just like you said it would. I sat down across from her, the small workbench between us like a lifeboat in a storm. That's not why I gave it to you, I said. Not to punish them. To free you. She shook her head. But I'm not free. Not from what I did. Not from what I let them do. That's your weight to carry now, I said, and there was no venom in it. Just fact. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Do you hate me? I stared at her for a long moment. Not at the woman I once loved, but at the one who'd stood on the porch and watched while her family kicked me into the dirt. No, I said. I don't hate you. But I'm not yours. Not anymore. Tears spilled freely then, but she didn't make a sound. She sat with it, quietly crying like someone who'd finally realized the apology didn't come with a reset button. You have a good life here, she said. I can see it. I do. She stood slowly, wiping her cheeks with the sleeve of that same coat. Thank you for seeing me. I nodded. Thank you for listening. She stepped to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. Will you ever come back? To what? I asked. She gave a broken smile. Exactly. And then she was gone. I stood in the middle of my workshop, the echo of her exit still humming in my ears. The storm outside had faded, leaving the air heavy with salt and renewal. I walked to the back window and watched the sea stretch endlessly into gray. Forgiveness is not the same as reunion. It's not a bridge, it's a release. And I had finally, fully let her go. I turned back to the bench, picked up Noelle's half-finished script, and got back to work. Because the past had taken enough from me, and I wasn't giving it another second. She didn't leave. That was the first surprise. I expected her to disappear after that morning, maybe return to the city and drown in the fallout she'd helped ignite. But Mariel stayed. Not in my world exactly, but close enough to share the air. Wyndham Bay wasn't big enough for ghosts, not the kind that walked around with real faces and pasts you couldn't forget. And yet, we both moved through it like strangers who had once shared a home, now reduced to nods and neutral stares across weathered sidewalks. I first saw her at Greta's Market 3 days after that conversation. She was standing in line behind Mrs. Talbot, cradling a paper bag of lemons and ginger like she was shielding something fragile. She didn't look at me, and I didn't look long. But it happened again 2 days later, on the docks this time, when she passed Ben a sealed envelope with a hesitant smile. I watched from the rigging of a boat I was patching. Ben grunted his usual disinterest, took the letter, and never said a word to me about it. That's how it was. Silent orbit. She took a part-time job at the local clinic. I heard about it through Noelle, who had an uncanny talent for collecting information without ever looking like he was trying. She's good with the patients, he told me once, casually, while debugging a login script. Listens more than she talks. Doesn't ask for special treatment. I didn't respond. I didn't want to know more than that. Some nights, I'd pass by the diner window and see her wiping down tables after closing, her back bent in quiet rhythm. Other times, I'd catch a glimpse of her pushing a shopping cart for old Mr. Holloway, whose arthritis made every errand an expedition. She blended into Wyndham Bay like salt in the sea, present, persistent, not quite invisible, not quite seen. People didn't know who she was to me. They didn't ask. They saw her as a new face, a helpful one. The clinic staff called her Mari. Kids waved when she handed out spare bandages or helped them clean scraped knees from bike accidents. And me? I became just another townie. The guy who ran AM Reeves Tech and fixed fishing software without fuss. One afternoon, Harper walked into the shop holding 2 coffees and handed me one without comment. She's still here, she said after a long sip. I didn't ask who she meant. Harper had eyes sharper than most people's truths. She waited until I glanced up from the code base before adding, She's not pretending to be your wife. Just surviving. I nodded. That was all I could give. It wasn't anger anymore. It was space. We moved like 2 notes in the same chord, neither clashing nor harmonizing, just coexisting. That should have been impossible, But Wyndham Bay had a strange way of absorbing pain and smoothing out the edges. Maybe it was the sea. Maybe it was the silence. She never showed up at the workshop again. Never brought up the USB, the slap, the yard, or the years. But every now and then, I'd find something, a bag of tools left on the porch that I'd mentioned needing in passing, a donation receipt in A.M. Reeves' text name from the town's youth center, or once. A copy of The Alchemist tucked into the mailbox with a bookmark at a line I had once recited to her in another life. I'd never told her that was my favorite passage. One cold evening in early November, I was walking back from Greta's, bag of groceries in hand, when I saw her helping a woman whose dog had slipped its leash and charged into the surf. The woman was panicked, and Mariel was soaked to the knees by the time she caught the dog's collar and returned it to its sobbing owner. No applause. No recognition. Just a nod from the woman and a small smile from Mariel that disappeared before it fully formed. She looked up and saw me watching. Our eyes met. Just for a moment. No words. Just shared breath and cold air and the echo of everything unsaid. I kept walking. So did she. That became our rhythm. Once, at the winter fair, she stood beside me unknowingly while waiting for mulled cider. I could smell the cinnamon, feel the tension, hear her breath catch when she noticed me. She didn't move. Neither did I. The silence was heavier than the snow. Finally, she said quietly, "The kids you helped teach coding. They're all talking about internships now." I nodded. "Noelle's heading to Boston in the spring." She smiled, a real one this time. "You've done good, Adrian." I didn't correct her. I let the name hang there between us. It didn't hurt the way it used to. "Miles fits too," I said. She nodded, then walked away. We never once talked about reconciliation. There was no talk of second chances or what-ifs. This wasn't a romance trying to stitch itself back together. This was two people who knew what they had shattered and had chosen, separately, not to pick up the shards. It took strength I didn't know I had. To see her rebuilding herself, not to win me back, but because guilt demanded she become better. To watch her earn the town's respect without leveraging mine. To know we were both breathing the same salt air but walking different paths. Mariel was no longer my wife. She was a stranger in town, but not the kind you fear. The kind you recognize. The kind you nod to in passing. The kind whose story you know without needing to speak it aloud. And that was enough. It started as a whisper. A quiet buzz that crept into town like fog over the bay, unseen at first, then suddenly everywhere. No one told me directly. That's not how things worked in Wyndham Bay. The town didn't shout its secrets. It let them drift in on the tide, sink into conversation, slip into the silence between sips of morning coffee. But I felt it. The shift. The looks that lingered a little longer. The strangers who stared at me like they knew something they hadn't known the week before. I was at Greta's, tightening a pipe beneath the sink in the back pantry, when I heard Harper's voice call from the front. Not frantic, but firm. "Miles, you might want to see this." I wiped my hands, stood slowly, and followed the voice. She was holding her phone, eyes locked on the screen, her brow furrowed the way it always was when something serious dropped. "Someone posted the audio," she said. "The full thing. It's on Reddit, Twitter, everywhere." I didn't have to ask which audio. I knew. The confession. Selena's voice, the same smug cadence I'd memorized during sleepless nights, now echoing in homes and offices and comment sections I'd never see. "Do they name names?" I asked. Harper shook her head. The poster kept it anonymous. No full names, no photos. Just a caption that says, "Sometimes, the truth just needs a push." I didn't say anything. I just took the phone and listened. It was surreal. That voice. Hers, spilling lies and laughter out. I handed the phone back and went outside. The air was crisp. The docks were quiet. I stood there and let the breeze hit my face, salt and wind tangling in my hair. That night, I didn't work. I didn't code. I didn't answer emails or troubleshoot bugs. I just sat in the dark of my workshop, watching the soft glow of the streetlight and the occasional car that passed by too slow, like curiosity was steering them. By morning, it was no longer just a whisper. It was a storm. The fallout began like a controlled burn, precise and targeted. Selena lost her job first. Her nonprofit issued a carefully worded statement about values and integrity, and within a day, her LinkedIn page was gone. Then came Ramon, the same man who dragged me out onto the lawn, who hadn't hesitated to let his fist speak for him, found himself resigning from his school board post after parents started demanding answers. Screenshots of his involvement swirled online. One clip even had a blurry photo of that day. Me, on the ground, bleeding, taken from across the street by a neighbor I'd never spoken to. Declan's gym closed next. Clients canceled memberships. Review bombs hit every listing. Someone posted a screen grab of an old social media comment where he called me a disgrace to men. That comment had aged like milk. And then, inevitably, the eye of the storm turned to Delphine, Mariel's mother. The matriarch who'd once looked down her nose at me and asked if I planned on staying in the family's good graces. Her charity board held an emergency meeting. By sunset, she was stepping down to focus on personal matters. No judge. No trial. Just silence and proof. I didn't leak the file. I didn't push any dominoes. I hadn't even told Harper. But I knew who had. Mariel. She never admitted it. Not in words. But I saw it in the way she moved through town after the storm broke. Quieter, but lighter. As if some weight had finally slipped from her shoulders and shattered at her feet. I ran into her again outside the clinic. She was holding a box of supplies, bandages, vitamins, things she was too proud to ask help carrying. I reached for the box without speaking, and she let me take it. We walked in silence to the back door. At the threshold, she turned to me. I didn't expect it to spread that fast. You posted it? I asked, already knowing the answer. She hesitated, then nodded. I couldn't carry it anymore. It didn't feel right, knowing the truth and doing nothing with it. It wasn't about revenge. I swear. I know, I said. It wasn't about them either. She looked down. I thought it would feel better than this. I nodded. It never does. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize again. We stood there like two people watching a tide come in, neither of us trying to run from it. Over the next week, I got messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were apologies, half-baked, cautious. Some were outright silence in the form of, "Hey, you okay?" Text from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to say. What do you say to people who watched you drown and then wanted to send lifeboats once the water was gone? No, thank you. I'm already on land. Harper brought a bottle of wine to the shop the next night. We sat on the back steps, passing it between us like teenagers hiding from parents. You did the right thing, she said. I didn't do anything, I replied. She smiled. Exactly. Truth doesn't need a loudspeaker. It just needs air. By the second week, Mariel's name started popping up in the articles. People pieced things together. She didn't hide from it. She gave one interview, brief, calm, and deliberate. I believed a lie. I hurt someone I loved. And I'm still reckoning with what it means to heal without expecting to be forgiven. I watched it on Harper's laptop. Once. It didn't shake me. It confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about vindication. It was about clarity. The world that had once painted me as a monster was now watching itself in a mirror I didn't have to hold up anymore. I walked through town the next morning and something had shifted. A man at the pier nodded at me. A woman at the post office smiled like she recognized something good in me, not just familiar. Even Greta, who never said anything without reason, handed me a paper bag with an extra sandwich inside. That's for the road, she said, just in case someone else needs saving today. I didn't correct her, because she was right. The story wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been dragged through the dirt without a voice. And now they had one. I didn't post the truth, but I lived long enough for it to speak. And in the end, that was more powerful than anything I could have written myself. It was a Thursday evening when he walked in, barely past sunset, the kind of golden hour where everything looks softer than it is. My workshop was quiet, just the low hum of a monitor and the gentle rhythm of Noel tapping away at his keyboard. I was soldering a connection for a custom rig we were building for a local marine tracker when I noticed the shadow at the door. A boy, maybe 17, maybe younger, tall, but with that tentative slouch that only came with youth and uncertainty. He didn't knock. He just stood there, backpack clutched against his chest, eyes darting around the room like he wasn't sure he had the right place. You lost? I asked without looking up fully. He stepped in slowly. You're Miles, right? The tech guy? I nodded, still watching him out of the corner of my eye. I read about the story online, he said. The audio clip. The guy who got accused and disappeared. That was you. It wasn't a question. Not really. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He walked closer, pulled something out of his backpack, just a sheet of folded paper, creased from being opened and refolded too many times. He unfolded it slowly and held it out to me like it was fragile. I took it. A sketch. Hand-drawn. Pencil on cheap lined paper, smudged in places. A man standing in a storm, chest out, face blank, no features, no smile, just presence. Wind howled around him, rain slashed his coat, but he stood there like he'd been planted in the ground by something deeper than willpower. At the bottom, in tiny block letters, "Truth doesn't flinch." For a moment, I didn't say anything. The silence hung between us, heavy and sacred. "You drew this?" I finally asked. He nodded. "I've been through something. Not the same, but it made me feel crazy. Like no one believed me. But then I heard the audio, and I saw the story spreading, and I thought, someone out there didn't fold. Didn't scream. Just stood. I folded the paper carefully, handed it back. "You keep that. It's yours." He didn't move to take it. "It's yours," I repeated. "You survived it. You deserve to remember that." His fingers trembled as he took the sketch back. His eyes were glassy now, rimmed red. "I didn't think I'd ever feel understood again," he said, voice cracking. "But you didn't flinch. Even after they ruined everything. You just kept going." I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him how many nights I wanted to disappear completely. How many mornings I woke up with rage clawing at my throat. How many versions of revenge I drafted in my head just to stay sane. None of that mattered now. What mattered was that somehow, in the quiet, in the restraint, someone saw it. Someone needed it. "Truth doesn't flinch," I repeated softly, more to myself than to him. He smiled, then small, but real. "I just wanted to say thank you." And then he left. No fanfare. No dramatic music. Just the creak of the door and the soft jingle of the bell above it. Noel looked up from his computer. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, better than okay." That night, I sat at the workbench long after everyone else had gone home. I stared at the empty chair across from mine and thought about all the moments I'd sat there with nothing but bitterness for company. I remembered the days I'd checked my name online just to see if anyone still believed I was human. The nights I'd prayed not for justice, but for invisibility. The months I built a business not to succeed, but to prove I still existed. And now this quiet ripple of truth had become something bigger. Not because I pushed it, but because it refused to die. The world has a way of rewarding spectacle. It loves the loud, the angry, the dramatic. But sometimes, silence carves deeper than shouting. Sometimes, refusing to flinch is louder than a scream. The next morning, I added something to the workshop wall, a framed version of that phrase, etched into an old piece of driftwood I'd been saving. "Truth doesn't flinch." Everyone who came in noticed it. No one asked where it came from. They didn't have to. Later that week, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a typed letter and a check. A real check. 6 figures. It read, "Mr. Reeves, we followed your work quietly for over a year. The integrity of your business, the discipline of your silence, and the loyalty of your team speak volumes. We'd like to partner with AM Reeves Tech for our upcoming security platform. No PR. No press. Just results. Let us know if you're ready. The Concilio Group." I stared at the paper for a long time. Not because of the money, but because for the first time, someone saw me, Miles, not Adrian, and wanted me exactly as I was. I called Harper and Noel into the office. "Read this," I said, handing them the letter. They skimmed it. Harper raised her eyebrows. Noel just whistled low. "You serious?" Harper asked. "Dead serious." Noel grinned. "About damn time." I nodded. "We're not changing how we work. We're not losing our edge just because someone finally noticed." Harper smirked. "Good. I hate suits." We toasted that night, not with champagne, but with Greta's homemade cider. The whole team sat in the workshop, laughter bouncing off the walls, hands stained with code and grease and paint. We weren't a company. We were a tribe. Survivors, misfits, truth-tellers. And now we had something more than proof. We had purpose. Later that night, I took a walk down to the beach. The sky was clear, stars scattered like salt. The tide was low, revealing stones and driftwood shaped by years of patient pressure. I stood there, hands in my pockets, thinking about Mariel, about how she once said she couldn't breathe under the weight of guilt, and how, now, I felt lighter. I never wanted to be a symbol, never asked to become a story. But maybe we don't choose that part. Maybe we just endure and hope someone else finds the strength they need in the ruins we leave behind. I pulled out my phone and stared at the dark screen for a while. Then I typed one sentence in my notes app. Sometimes the softest voice carries the sharpest blade. And I left it there. Not to post. Not to share. Just to remember. The boy had drawn a faceless man in the storm. But I wasn't faceless anymore. I was Miles. I was Truth. And I didn't flinch. The knock came 1 hour before dusk. Same rhythm as always, 3 soft taps, followed by hesitation. I didn't have to ask who it was. I knew. The ocean outside the workshop hissed with a rising tide, and the amber light spilling in through the windows carved everything into long shadows. I stood slowly, brushing sawdust off my jeans, my fingers still stained with the polish we'd used on a custom desktop rig for a local filmmaker. The day had been full, the kind of full that settles you. But now, it was about to end in a way I'd been quietly expecting. I opened the door, and there she stood, Mariel. Windswept, eyes tired but steady, hair pulled back in a low, loose ponytail. She wore a navy blue coat this time, different from the threadbare one she'd arrived in months ago. Her expression held no surprise, no hope, just that quiet grace you only find in someone who's come to terms with being the one who can't stay. "I won't take long," she said softly. I nodded once and stepped aside. She didn't walk in right away. Her eyes scanned the workshop, now more organized, the shelves lined with labeled parts, framed client thank you notes, and our etched driftwood mantra, "Truth doesn't flinch." I saw her pause when she read it. She didn't speak on it, but her lips pressed together like she wanted to. She stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. "I leave tomorrow morning," she said, still facing the room, not me. "Clinic offered me a post 2 towns north. Same kind of place. Quiet. Good people. You told them yet?" I asked. She shook her head. "Told Greta this morning. Told Mrs. Holloway I'd help her pack her groceries one last time." I motioned toward a chair, but she remained standing, hands folded in front of her. "I didn't come to ask for a second chance," she said. "I think we passed that road a long time ago." I stayed quiet. "I just needed to see you. One last time. Not the man I remembered. Not the man I accused. Just the man you became. Miles." That name sat between us with no discomfort now. It was real. Not an alias. Not a disguise. Just a truth carved from everything the world tried to break. She stepped toward my workbench, fingers brushing the edge like she was feeling the grain of my life. "You built something beautiful here," she murmured. "I didn't build it for revenge," I said. "I know," she whispered. "You built it to survive." Her voice trembled slightly. "I used to think strength looked like shouting, like calling people out, demanding apologies, burning bridges if you had to. But you never raised your voice. You never pointed fingers. And the world heard you anyway." I walked over to the counter, picked up a small envelope, and handed it to her. She took it slowly. "What's this?" "It's a letter. For you. Not from Adrian. Not even from Miles. Just from the man who lived both." She opened it with careful hands, unfolded the single page, and read in silence. I watched her eyes scan the words. Watched them shine, then swell. Her throat worked around something she didn't say aloud. When she folded the letter again, her shoulders had dropped, not in defeat, but in relief, like the weight she carried had finally found a resting place. "Thank you," she said. I nodded. "Closure isn't about fixing what's broken," I said gently. "It's about walking away without dragging the shards with you." She took a step toward me. Not close enough to reach, just enough for honesty. "I know we can't go back," she said, "but I needed you to see that I know now. I needed you to know that I'll carry that truth. All of it. Every day." "Good," I said, "because that's all that's left to carry." We stood there, 2 people with history in their bones and silence in their mouths. No fireworks. No dramatics. Just peace. The kind that comes when the last word isn't shouted, but accepted. She turned to go, pausing at the door. "You know, for a long time, I wanted to erase what happened. Pretend it was just a nightmare we could wake up from. But now, I think I'd rather remember it. All of it. Because remembering is the only way to grow." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She opened the door. The wind caught her coat as she stepped onto the porch. The sky was purple now, fading into indigo. The sea beyond was calm. As she walked away, she didn't look back. And I didn't expect her to. I watched until she turned the corner at the end of the lane. Then I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. That was the last goodbye. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just final. I turned off the lights and walked through the workshop, running my fingers along the familiar places, the edge of Noelle's desk, the shelf Harper kept cluttered with her sketches, the gear rack Greta insisted was good luck. I pulled out the framed sketch the boy had given me, still pinned behind my workbench. The man in the storm. Faceless. Unmoved. And beneath it, "Truth doesn't flinch." I smiled. Because I